Howdy folks, it's Roby here with the Manufactured Mind. And I have a very insightful episode to share with y'all today. It's called The Yin and Yang of Recovery, Finding Light Through Darkness. In this episode I aim to inspire, encourage, and inform with this story and to make people more aware of the yin and yang in their own life. This episode, we will explore the depths of human experience and the power of transformation. Today's episode is deeply personal and universal at the same time. It's about the eternal dance of yin and yang, the light and the dark, and how this ancient concept applies to substance abuse, recovery, and ultimately self-discovery. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day today. So let's get right into it. First, let me give you some examples of the yin and the yang in my life. So, one is neurodivergence and trauma created vulnerability. Then, substance abuse became a coping mechanism. Which, let me back up to the neurodivergence. Undiagnosed neurodivergence and trauma created vulnerability. I didn't have the tools to cope with my neurodivergency and the diagnoses that I have. Then substance abuse became a coping mechanism, a false light in the dark. However, through addiction, through substance abuse, I learned about human nature, social dynamics, and empathy on a much deeper level than I knew to be. So what is yin and yang? Well, yin and yang is an ancient Chinese philosophy. Opposites are interconnected and interdependent. For instance, light cannot exist without the darkness, and the darkness cannot exist without the light. In life, this means every struggle carries the seed of growth. Within every negative, as I always say, always is a positive. And within every positive is a negative, but it's up to you to recognize it, and it's up to you to choose which one you focus on. And I would encourage you to focus on the positive. So hopefully, after hearing this, you will have a better understanding of yin and yang in life and recovery. So let me take you back to a time when I was living in the shadows. My substance abuse wasn't random. It was a product of my underdiagnosed neurodivergence and my inability to socialize like a neurotypical person. Drugs became my bridge to human connection. They taught me in the darkest way possible how people converse, how they behave, and yes, how evil people can be. But here's the paradox, folks. I was yin and yang. We all are. I've always been a very kind-hearted and empathetic individual, yet substance abuse gave me a lens into the darkness. The only evil I committed was using substances, and I stole some medications from a family member one time. But through that, I observed how it affected others and how it consumed entire groups of people, including my family members. And here's the truth. The dark led me to the light. Today, I'm 2 years into recovery, going on my 3rd year. I've uncovered the root causes, which is untreated neurodivergence and suppressed trauma. Now, some people aren't going to agree with this next bit that I say, but it's something that has very much helped me. So, solitude. Solitude became my sanctuary. 5 years of living alone gave me the space to heal And over the last 2 years, I've immersed myself in knowledge, education, wisdom. I faced myself, the version I buried for decades, years, and now I stand in the light. At one point, just 3 years ago, I couldn't see the end of the tunnel. I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I was ready to check out of life. I was literally sitting here contemplating checking out. I'm like, man, is this even worth it? Like, I don't see the light. I just don't. I don't see me making it out of this. And that's what I was telling myself, folks. I honestly could not see me where I am right now. I honestly couldn't for the longest time. And maybe it's because I didn't want to. Who knows? But, I did persist and I endured the darkness and found the light. Finally. That's yin and yang. So let me shed light on understanding the yin and yang in life and recovery. The way one can start applying yin and yang right now, to life and substance abuse is, so yin is darkness, so addiction. Isolation, not solitude, isolation. Despair, self-destructive behaviors, anger, depression, toxic narcissism, jealousy, etc. And then the yang is light. So things like recovery, self-awareness, resilience, wisdom, love, kindness, gratitude, charisma, respect, discipline, integrity, honesty, and truth. The paradox here is darkness taught me lessons that light alone could never teach. And I am only realizing this over the last 2 years of my recovery, folks. And, when I was in active substance abuse, I often would sit there and observe people and how it affected everybody differently, but in the same way, in so many ways. And it was quite profound to witness. And it had me thinking and wondering, just what exactly it's doing to the brain. Mind you, I was in fear of even looking up what I was doing to my body and my brain. And the reason I dove into substances was not only because I was prescribed them and got hooked on them that way, but they gave me a sense of normalcy. I felt, neurotypical. I could socialize. I could talk to anybody about anything and not feel awkward or anxious or feel like I have to mask myself. But essentially, I was masking myself because that wasn't really me. I struggle with social interactions. Some would say that I'm pretty darn good at socializing, but that's from the outside looking in, not from the inside looking out. But I will give credit where credit's due. I have worked really hard on being social because obviously I am doing a podcast and I have to socialize and be able to talk comfortably and confidently to you folks so that you will carry some value or attain some value, retain some value from this podcast. So, having said, there are positives and negative forces to this. So here is a deep dive into each element. The positive side of darkness. It forces introspection. It challenges your current perspective and creates a learning experience. Again, there is the positive within the negative. Not to mention the fact that it often reveals truths about yourself and others. And finally, it builds resilience. Pain becomes a teacher. And when pain becomes the teacher and you listen, then you don't have to continue to repeat that same and feel that same pain over and over again if you would just listen to the pain in the first place. But it takes deep reflection to really listen to the pain. And that takes patience and discipline. It doesn't happen overnight, folks. Everything I'm talking about is all factual, true information based off of my own personal experience, and this is how I have shifted my perspective of looking at it. To whereas before, I was in the victim mindset and in active substance abuse. I was very much so victim mindseted, very negative, and it was not good. But I realized that, and I shifted and started making changes. And unless you start making changes, folks, you will always stay the same. So, moving on to the negative side of darkness. It can consume you if you don't recognize it as temporary. This is vital, folks. You must remind yourself and tell yourself that it's temporary. You cannot let it consume you. It isolates and distorts reality. For example, it makes you live a life you think is everything but what it actually is. It's a facade. It makes you feel like you're living in this great, wonderful, happy world until you don't have that substance. But like I said, this can be applied to life in general, not just substance abuse. So I want to make that very clear, because I want, I want everybody to be able to get something from this. And so moving on to the light, the positive side of light. Well, it brings healing. It brings clarity. And it's brought purpose for me. It's given me the ability to help others through my shared experiences, which is what I'm doing right now. So, and that's my entire aim of this whole podcast, is to help others via my shared experiences. And the knowledge and wisdom that I have gathered along the way. So there are negative sides to the light, though, which can be complacency, for instance, forgetting the lessons of darkness. So memory is key. Remembering is vital, folks. I often have this philosophy that, and many do, I think, in the Eastern culture of meditation and stuff like that, maybe like Buddhism and Hinduism, but I think that the whole kind of purpose of our presence here is not just learning, but remembering. And to remember, we must meditate and reflect. To remember who we truly are. Because we are born into a world that molds us to its liking from day one. And then once we are old enough to realize that something isn't right, something just isn't adding up with me, with somebody else, with society, and you start to really reflect and remember who you are. And you realize that you're not at all what you've been molded to be. And quite frankly, that is a very liberating moment. Overconfidence and arrogance, thinking that you're immune to relapse. This is very common. Very common. No one is immune to relapse, folks. I don't care if you are 3 months into recovery, 3 years into recovery, 30 years into recovery. No one is immune to relapse. Unless you want to be. How about that? Unless you want to be. If you truly want to be immune to relapse, then you can be immune to relapse. But most people aren't immune to relapse. But now that I'm saying that, that's why I kind of changed it up. I was like, well, actually, see, this is how my mind works, folks. Is, I pick apart what I'm saying as I'm saying it because I often realize different perspectives on matters as I'm talking about them. So that's what just happened. Let's see here. Oh, the honeymoon phase, I would argue, is a highly negative side to the light. In recovery, at least. That early recovery phase, I'm sure if you have tried to get off of substances or on substances and, or you've been in recovery for a period of time and maybe relapsed, you know that what I'm talking about when I say that honeymoon phase. It's that phase where everything feels so easy. Like it's a cakewalk, or this isn't too bad. Shit, I can do this, man. Whatever, you tell yourself in those first few months when you're feeling a lot better than you expected. That can really get into one's mind and break you if you are not aware. And it just leads to the overconfidence and arrogance that honeymoon phase does. And so the honeymoon phase is deadly, folks. It can be deadly. It can trip you up really, really freaking quick, man. So just be aware of this stuff, folks. That's all I'm trying to do is make people aware. So some practical wisdom. How to recognize the yin and the yang in your life. Okay? So step 1, awareness. Acknowledge both sides exist within you. You cannot only recognize the positive, even though that would be nice. And you cannot only recognize the negative. Well, because that would be miserable. You have to recognize them both in order to be able to differentiate the two. And, be aware of the fact that no one human is perfect. There is yin and yang present in all of us. Be aware. Be aware. Step 2, integration. So don't reject your darkness. Don't reject your darkness. Learn from it, folks. Everything is a lesson. Everything has a lesson to be learned. recognize it, find it, and integrate it so you don't make the same mistake twice, which many of us often do. I know I've done it a million times. Something I've been trying to focus on lately is really listening to my instinct, my intuition, because I would argue that every time that I have not listened to my instincts, which has been every time until now, they've proven my choice wrong. But they proved that my initial intuitive thought was right. But yet I persisted in not going with my instinct. But now I do. I will not turn away from my instinct ever again. I have a very complex process that my instinct and intuition uses to acquire the gut instinct feeling that I get. I'm very attuned to pattern recognition. I'm very attuned to a lot of things, like hyper attuned to a lot of things due to my neurodivergency. Adaptation. So this is step 3, adaptation. Use lessons from pain to build strength. Lessons are valuable, folks, and if you can adapt a better lifestyle slowly but surely over time, it will pay off. And step 4, continuous growth. Seek knowledge. I cannot stress this enough. Seek knowledge, stay humble, and stay vigilant. The day we stop learning is the day we start dying. And we always have something new to learn to make us a better person and create concrete coping mechanisms. Over the last 5 years, I was clean for a year and a half. And then, another year and a half I was using again. And then I've been sober and in recovery for 2 years now. So the year and a half that I was using within this 5 years, I was still learning. I was still diving deep into education, just educating myself for the last 5 years. Intensely educating myself on what I've done to my body, paying attention to my body. I've done a lot of self-learning on myself, listening to my inner self, honing my focus inward, facing my traumas, researching, so many philosophers and esteemed scholars and their teachings. And Carl Jung was one of the most profound psychologists / philosophers that I think I've ever listened to when I was in substance abuse, and that man's teachings changed my life. So I would highly encourage anybody who wants to seek inner reflection and integrate your inner shadow self so that you aren't fighting against it all the time and it isn't bringing you down. You learn to integrate it. Again, integrate the yin. You're the yang, but the yin rests within. It is thy shadow. Again, be aware. And create those concrete coping mechanisms, folks. Over time, you're not going to get it again overnight. It's not going to happen. Over time, you learn to incorporate what others have used to help them, and then you adapt those methods and integrate them into your own your own way. So for instance, what I'm telling you, what I've used to help me, you could take that and apply some of it, because I'm sure not all of it will work for everybody, but you could apply some of it and then put your own twist onto it to create your own path of recovery that you can then pass on to someone else. So that's the beautiful cycle of this, folks. Is, we are thrown into these situations, I think, to learn and then to teach. And I feel like if people had more of that mindset on negative things, to learn and then to teach, then people would be so much better off. And the way you learn from it is you have to have the discipline to incorporate what you learned, because if you can't incorporate what you've learned or have the discipline to do so, then you're not going to have the discipline to be in recovery, and you damn sure aren't going to have the discipline or the right to preach any advice to anybody, especially if you're not practicing what you preach. So integrate, folks. Some tools for recovery and self-discovery that I've used. Journaling my thoughts and triggers. I often have so sometimes I'll write it down, but oftentimes I use my little voice recorder. It's a handheld voice recorder, because I'll lose my thoughts very quickly. Again, because of my neurodivergency. My mind's always racing. I'll forget what I'm talking about in mid-conversation. I'm sure that you'll see me do that in some of my episodes. But I use the portable recorder, and I carry it with me everywhere, because I could be driving down the road and have some deep thought that, I just feel the need. I'm like, oh, I'll remember this. I'll write it down when I get home. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So I started carrying the recorder with me, and that's my way of journaling. That's my method. Practicing solitude without isolation. So turn alone time into reflection. Again, as I'm sure many of you have heard me say before, that, I am all for solitude. However, it's not for everybody. Solitude can be dangerous for some in recovery. It can lead to bad thoughts if you're not in the right mindset, if you're not in the truly wanting to learn how to get out of the issue, the situation or problem that you're in. If you don't have that thirst, then isolation probably isn't for you. But if you do have that thirst to learn, to integrate, to improve, to be better, do better, to truly apply yourself and try to figure out your issues, then solitude might not be off the radar for you. It was very powerful for me, and I'm still living alone. I'll be having someone moving in with me, very special, in about a year's time. So I look very much forward to that, and very excited about it, because it's been a long time since I've lived with someone, and there's a reason for that. I chose to live alone and separate myself from dating, separate myself from even messaging, women in general, and just took the time to myself and focused on myself. Because I knew that, that first year and a half that I was in recovery, my gut feeling was telling me that, and maybe it's because I didn't believe in myself is why I relapsed. But something told me that I wasn't going to be able to stick with it then. And I didn't. And that could be very well the reason why I didn't, is because I was thinking that. Because our thoughts are very powerful. Having said, when I got to the relapse point, the solitude did seem to start worsening for me. It was starting to become unhealthy. Like I said earlier in this episode about me not being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That was in my solitude, and I was struggling with it very badly, and that was during that year and a half relapse. So, it's difficult, man. It's not for the faint of heart, man. You gotta be strong-minded. And I've really proven to myself just how much mental fortitude I have by me recovering in solitude. That's not something you hear of much. They definitely don't preach that stuff in therapy. But what works for one may not work for another. And, this generalized therapy, one-size-fits-all method doesn't work for me at all. Honestly, this is therapy for me. Me talking to y'all. Whoever y'all are, whoever's listening, it's kind of therapy for me just sitting here talking about this stuff, and because I'm essentially still reflecting on it as I'm, telling my experiences and what I've learned. So it's good for me. Another tool, seeking therapy or safe places for trauma processing. So, safe places for me was my solitude. Safe places for others might be in a therapy setting. Safe places for me is with one really close friend. Having that time to talk to that person. Somebody who I can relate to, who can relate to me. That's been very vital. And then immersing oneself in education and wisdom. So books, podcast, mentors. Immerse. So, alright, look. So you know how you get cravings for substance abuse. Or it's not substance abuse. You get cravings for substances, for drugs. And it makes you want to go abuse substances. Well, I shifted my craving for knowledge and wisdom rather than for drugs. So I immerse myself into these cravings. So these, I would argue, are healthy cravings. Knowledge, wisdom, the knowledge the knowledge to overcome, and the wisdom to carry me through. And books, podcasts, mentors, all three of those things have played a huge, huge role, and philosophers, and changing my entire thought process, my perspective on life. Everything has changed for me. It's done a complete 180 from dark to light, night and day difference, folks. Night and day difference. And I know that you can find your yin and yang too. And I know that you can focus on it, figure it out, integrate it, learn from it, so that you don't keep repeating the same mistakes. Remember, addiction, substance abuse, whatever you want to call it, it is a symptom of a cause, okay? A symptom of an underlying cause. For me, the underlying cause was the suppressed trauma, the undiagnosed or underdiagnosed neurodivergence. Which I only just got the diagnoses like 3 years ago. And it was liberating for me to find out exactly what it is. And it's ADHD, autism and ADHD. And I now know what I need to do. And now that I know that is the underlying cause that has been the reason why I mask myself, why I'm antisocial at times, why I'm so exhausted after social interactions, why I do all this, like, what people would probably say, weird stimming methods with my hands in my mouth when I'm in social settings, or I guess when my anxiety is high. I'm always misunderstood, misperceived, misjudged, misinterpreted. I learn differently than others. You know, I have problems finishing things that I started. Fortunately, the podcast has been a pivotal point for that very issue right there for me. Because I've been following through with the podcast, and I intend to continue to follow through. I don't care how many followers I have or don't have, as long as it's bringing value to somebody's life. And I would like to think that there's at least one person out there who finds the information that I share valuable or useful. So, immerse yourself, folks. Immerse yourself in books, podcasts, and mentors, education, knowledge, wisdom. Learn it. Get hooked on learning. Like they said, hooked on phonics. Get hooked on learning, folks. And so, I'm going to finish up today's episode with some final thoughts. So, yin and yang isn't just philosophy, folks. It's life. Darkness isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. Light isn't your destination. It's your balance. My journey from substance abuse to recovery proves that even in your lowest moments, you're gathering the strength of your highest ones. As in your highest moments. If you're listening and you're in the dark right now, remember this. The light does exist. Why? Because you exist. Keep moving. Keep learning. Keep enduring. The manufactured mind is about creating the life you deserve. One thought, one choice, one day at a time. We have to reprogram and remanufacture our manufactured minds, folks. Okay? And I have a call to action for you all. Share this episode with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more deep dives into the human experience, my experience personally. And remember, You are both yin and yang, so embrace it. And let me leave you all with this famous quote from Lao Tzu's, followed by some food for thought. So Lao Tzu's quote is, "When you realize nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you." And my food for thought, folks, is, what has your darkness taught you? What have you learned? What has your teacher taught you? Your darkness. Leave a comment, if you would, and tell me. I would like to know what you've learned in your darkness, what your darkness teacher has taught you. And the balance that your light has provided you. So think about that. What has your darkness taught you, and what balance has your light provided you? And I'm going to leave you with that, folks. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, this is Roby with the Manufactured Mind, signing off. I'll catch you folks on the next one. Have a wonderful day. Peace.